Bienvenue au panel Méthodologies et approches féministes en matière d'aide au développement. Mon nom est Marie Gagné. Je suis membre du conseil d'administration de l'Association canadienne d'études du développement international, ACDI, et également chercheuse postdoctorale à l'Université Concordia. Donc, l'ACDI est très enthousiaste par rapport à la tenue de cet événement. J'aimerais d'ailleurs remercier mes collègues de l'ACDI, Kate Grantham et Laura Paridi, pour leur travail dans l'organisation de ce panel. On a aujourd'hui des invités de haut niveau qui vont nous partager des exemples d'outils et d'approches développés pour favoriser l'autonomisation des femmes dans divers secteurs. Donc, l'événement présenté s'effectue dans le cadre d'un partenariat avec Affaires mondiales Canada. J'aimerais maintenant donner la parole à Mme Marie Niramana, directrice de la recherche et des connaissances en matière d'aide internationale à Affaires mondiales Canada. Mme Niramana a plus de 30 ans d'expérience dans le domaine de la sécurité alimentaire, la gouvernance démocratique et les droits humains. Elle travaille pour la fonction publique canadienne depuis 1998. Elle a joint l'Agence canadienne de développement international en 2002 et est actuellement avec le ministère des Affaires mondiales du Canada depuis 2013. À vous la parole.
Merci Marie. Bonjour. Je tiens à souligner d'abord que je vous parle depuis le territoire traditionnel et non cédé du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. Depuis 2017, date à laquelle le Canada a lancé sa politique féministe d'aide internationale, à ce jour, le Canada a centré son aide internationale autour d'une perspective féministe, intersectionnelle et basée sur les droits humains. Le mandat actuel du ministère demeure l'amélioration de l'efficacité et de l'efficience de l'aide au développement international afin qu'elle atteigne mieux les plus vulnérables. Pour ce faire, nous savons que nous devions travailler à l'amélioration de l'égalité de genre, notamment en collaboration directement avec les organisations de défense des droits des femmes à l'échelle locale et en donnant aux femmes et aux filles le pouvoir de prendre des décisions. Nous savons également que pour atteindre cet objectif, nous devons aussi être innovants dans nos approches. Le panel de discussion d'aujourd'hui, qui présente des méthodologies et des approches féministes et prometteuses, contribue à la réalisation de cet objectif. Je tiens donc à remercier la CEDI d'avoir organisé ce panel et de nous avoir invités, ainsi que les intervenants qui vont partager leurs expériences et leur expertise. Alors, nos collègues et moi avons hâte d'apprendre de votre travail. Merci beaucoup. À toi, Marie.
Oui, donc merci Marie. Avant de passer au panel en tant que tel, permettez-moi de vous présenter la modératrice, Mme Andréane Martel. Andréane est présentement directrice du programme national Activer le changement du réseau de coordination des conseils. Et c'est une initiative qui soutient près de 400 petites et moyennes organisations de solidarité internationale à travers le Canada. Andréane était auparavant responsable du programme Prochaine Génération, un partenariat entre Coopération Canada et la CEDI. Elle a également travaillé au sein de la division des politiques et de l'évaluation du Centre de recherche en développement international. Donc, bon panel à tous et merci Andréane.
Merci Marie, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Welcome everyone to this event on feminist methodologies and approaches for international assistance. As Marie said, my name is Andréane Martel. My pronouns are her, she, and elle, and I'm joining today from Tiohtià:ke, also known as Montreal. I would like to recognize the Mohawk Nation as the custodians of this land. So as Marie said, we have a great lineup of panelists for today's event, but before introducing them, I would just briefly share the structure and features we'll be using during this webinar. So if you haven't yet, I invite you to use the interpretation feature, as this is going to be a bilingual session with panelists speaking in French and English. So to use the interpretation feature, please select your preferred language on the bottom right of your screen. Donc, si vous venez tout juste de vous joindre à nous, donc, je vous invite à utiliser l'interprétation simultanée. Ce sera une session bilingue, donc il y aura des présentations en anglais et en français. Vous pouvez sélectionner la langue de votre choix, soit l'anglais ou le français, via l'icône en bas de votre écran. A link to access bilingual slides will also be shared via the chat. In terms of the structure of today's session, so each panelist will be invited to present a feminist tool, initiative, or methodology they've been using, and their presentation will be followed by a Q&A. So we want this event to be participatory and a conversation between you and the panelists. So we invite you to write your questions in the chat during the presentations. Your questions could be written in English or in French, and we will select a few of them for each panelist after the 3 presentations are over. You will also be invited to unmute and ask your questions directly to the panelists. So during the presentation, we invite you to remain muted at all times. Also, if you feel comfortable, we invite you to open your camera during the discussion and Q&A, so it will make the sessions a little bit more human-centered. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our 3 panelists today. So first of all, Andreas Goodsborough. So Andreas has more than 14 years of international development experience, including 6 years in developing countries. He is currently a senior monitoring and evaluation advisor at Plan International Canada, where he specializes in monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning initiatives and systems that support evidence-based practice for improving programming quality and effectiveness. Notre deuxième panéliste, Rachel Chema-Adjé, est sociologue du développement social de formation. Rachel a une expérience professionnelle de plus de 10 ans sur les questions de genre et développement. Elle a travaillé dans les organisations des Nations Unies, dont le Fonds des Nations Unies pour la population et dans plusieurs ONG internationales. Elle travaille aujourd'hui pour l'organisation Socodevi en tant que spécialiste principale en égalité des genres. À ce titre, elle assure l'intégration de l'égalité des genres dans la programmation et les interventions de Socodevi, mais elle s'occupe également de l'appui aux coopératives pour une gestion inclusive. And finally, her third panelist is Myrtle Witboy. Myrtle is a South African labor activist who started organizing workers during apartheid. She currently serves as the General Secretary of the South African Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union. She's also the first president of the International Domestic Workers Federation, IDWF, a membership-based global organization of household and domestic workers. IDWF is the first international labor federation run by women for work dominated by women. So thanks you to the 3 of you for agreeing to share your work, your experience, your knowledge with us today. So Andres, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Perfect. All right, so good morning, everyone. As Andrian mentioned, my name is Andres Goldsborough, and I'm a senior M&E advisor at Plan Canada. Plan Canada's core mission is to advance children's rights and, of course, equality for girls and women around the world. We work in 70 countries throughout the globe and focus on 8 thematic areas: health, WASH, education, economic empowerment, climate change, youth engagement, emergencies, and of course, gender equality and inclusion. Today, I have the privilege to showcase a very concrete monitoring and evaluation and programming methodology, the participatory institutional assessment and planning methodology, or PIAP for short, which we believe is well grounded in feminist principles. But before I go through the methodology, let me quickly explain what does feminist or gender transformative monitoring, evaluation, and research means for us. So focus on the box that's in the bottom right corner. And for us, for monitoring, evaluation, and research to be gender transformative, two things need to happen. The first one is that we need to evaluate the status and the change of power dynamics between men and women. So the root causes of inequalities, we have to measure and assess that, right? That's one. And that's relatively easy, relatively. But the second one, the second thing that needs to happen is we need to examine the role of power in the act of M&E and in the act of research and address that to redistribute power. So the first one is about like, what do we measure? And the second one is like, how do we measure it? So making sure that the process of M&E and the process of research is empowering in itself, right? So those two things need to happen. And we feel that the methodology that we're gonna showcase, although not perfect, is closer to the gender transformative bit within this GE spectrum. This methodology is embedded in a program that's called the Women's Voice and Leadership Program. And the main objective is to advance gender equality and women's and girls' rights through the strengthening and support of women's rights organizations, networks, and alliances, right? It's a 5-year program. It's financed by Global Affairs Canada, and we currently implementing it in Ghana and Ethiopia in very close collaboration with leading women's rights organizations in countries. And of course, the whole program, there's an embedded commitment to a feminist approach throughout. So what does this program look like in a nutshell, right? It has 3 streams. The first stream is all around capacity development of women's rights organizations to strengthen the organizations themselves. The second one is about funding, right? Flexible funds, foundational funding, so that women's organizations can do what they do best. And the third stream is a stream that revolves around coordinated action, right? So supporting, strengthening the networks so that more coordinated, large-scale national activities, very importantly, advocacy can take place. Now, central to the approach here is a foundational component is this participatory institutional self-assessment and planning, right? So the core objective of this methodology is to provide support to organizations so that they can examine, prioritize, and address their organizational development needs, right? So it's basically a methodology that spans throughout 4 days, like a process, a workshop that spans throughout 4 days. And it starts off, in a nutshell, I'm simplifying here, it starts off with a staff and volunteer survey, right? Where we assess the different organizational areas, right? That's the start. Data is gathered, processed, and then it's taken to a participatory discussion where the whole organization, all members, staff, volunteers, analyze the results, understand where they are and decide where are the strengths and gaps. And of course, prioritize the issues for their organization, right? Then a second moment, or a third moment, I would say, is kind of like a root cause analysis. Like we've identified the issues within the organizations. Why are they happening? So they deconstruct the issues, kind of like flip it over and have like a set of objectives that they want. And then they finally construct capacity development plans specifically for their organizations. So what results of this? Well, one, it's a comprehensive, institutional assessment that's carried out by the organization itself. Second, an institutional development plan that's catered to the organization and it's developed by them and they can follow up. But here's the M&E part as well, right? So the results serve to track the performance of the program, right? So we collect the data, we see the results, and they kind of feed into the program's indicators. But also very importantly, there's a second moment where all the women's organizations get together, they look at their results, they look at their planning, and they actually inform the first stream of the project, the capacity development stream, right? So it's these organizational assessments put together that kind of inform what the program is going to do in terms of capacity development. So that's in a nutshell the participatory institutional assessment. Now you would ask, Andres, where's the feminist part? Where's the gender transformative part? Well, let me showcase a few of the elements that we believe it's gender transformative or closer to the spectrum. So the first one is that the whole methodology, the whole tool, the steps, the workshop was developed in close consultation with the women's organizations themselves. From the indicators that they chose in terms of performance to what are the variables, domains, and subdomains in the organization that we're going to measure, what the tool looks like, how is the facilitation going to look like. Everything was co-designed with women's organizations. That's the first step, right? A lot of ownership there. The second one is around like the what we measure, right? So of course, it's an organizational assessment. We do measure the traditional elements, governance and strategic leadership, people management, finance, project execution, etc. But we've embedded in the assessment 2 elements that are distinct and that revolve around gender equality. One is the capacity and skills to actually deliver gender transformative programming. That is very important for us. So we do assess it to see where they are and what can be done to improve their gender transformative programming. And then the second one is more at the organizational level, right? So what feminist approaches are used at the organizational level? So we measure those 2 distinct things as part of the institutional assessment. Next one, and this is relatively obvious, it's the ownership of the process. So think about the flip side, right? So this is not a consultant going in and assessing a women's rights organization, right? This is the organization themselves. As I mentioned, every single person, not only leadership, every single person looking and assessing their organization and then coming together and discussing in terms of what goes well and what doesn't. So they own the process. And not only they own the process, but the actual rollout and methodology is carried, and facilitation is carried out by women's organizations themselves. So within the methodology, what we do is we create what we call a CAT, so a core assessment team. So it's a group of people that come from the women's organizations themselves. They are trained and they actually go around facilitating the process for different women's rights organizations. The process is theirs, right? But they also own the product, right? So as I mentioned, at the end of the day, they have an assessment that is theirs, right? And they have a methodology and a system that they can use in the future, whenever they want to reassess their organization, right? So the methodology lives with them, but also the products. So the actual assessment that tells them where they are, and the institutional assessment plan, right? That is catered and individualized for that particular organization. So that's in a nutshell, the participatory institutional assessment. Now, let me share with you my last slide, of course, some key considerations, right? This sounds great, but it's sometimes difficult to implement. So the first one, invest in capacity development, right? Truly participatory processes that are led by women requires some prior investment in terms of capacity development. So this program in particular invested heavily in the facilitators, which were members of the women's organizations themselves. It would have been easier to hire a consultant, but we said, no, let's work with them. So it requires some capacity development, some prior capacity development before you can execute it. And this is clear and important. The second one, and this one is surprising, but it's harness technology, right? So we as I mentioned, this is a 4-day workshop where in day number 2, you're analyzing a bunch of data in terms of like scores, what's up, what's low, and so on. So we generated a management information system where the data would be like the responses would be easily inputted, automatically analyzed, graphs were automatically generated and exported to a PowerPoint so that the facilitators had everything there readily available. So hardness technology, don't shy away from it. This one is super important, is like in terms of donor relationships and how we work, is negotiate timing and deliverables, right? This is not business as usual. This is not, oh, I have to do a baseline for my project and I've got 3 months to do it. Well, that's easy when you have a consultant comes in or you do it yourself. Off you go, that's doable. But here, remember, you have to invest in the process. You have to co-design. You have to train and build capacity before you actually do the process and collect the information and collect your baseline information. So negotiate times and deliverables and recognize that it's not business as usual and that it will take a bit more time. And the last one, this is a tricky one. Be mindful of consultation fatigue. Like, I don't like to hear it, but it's true. It's a fact. Like, look, these women leading these women's rights organizations are busy. They're doing so many things, and they're committed and happy to participate. But there's a point where is it too much? And you know, in Ghana and in Ethiopia, several occasions they expressed like, Andres, stop, you're busy, right? So balancing that is a tricky one in terms of participation, but also, you know, timing and consultation fatigue of participants. With that, I thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for sharing your experience using this highly participatory approach. I'm glad you mentioned the consultation fatigue at the end, because I was about to ask a question about that. So thanks for sharing. I'm sure the audience are also having questions, so I invite you to share your questions directly in the chat. I see that there's already one, and we will, and the rest will be invited to respond to the questions at the end of the tree presentation. Donc maintenant, Rachel, je vous invite à nous partager l'une des initiatives phares de votre travail à SOCODEVI en termes de leadership féminin. Rachel, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Je vois que votre caméra est fermée. Vous pouvez ouvrir la caméra, puis enlever la sourdine. Oh, vous êtes encore en sourdine. Oh. Maybe I will ask Kate to, oh, there we are. Voilà, la parole est à vous, Rachel.
OK. Merci beaucoup, madame. Et je vous remercie pour l'opportunité que vous nous donnez de partager notre outil. Alors, SOCODEVI, c'est une organisation canadienne qui travaille pour le renforcement des coopératives de production de cacao et de la noix de cajou, mais également pour l'amélioration des conditions de vie des populations. Et l'égalité des genres est une valeur fondamentale pour notre organisation, si bien que nous avons doté notre organisation d'une stratégie en égalité des genres. Et donc, cette stratégie permet de contribuer à la réponse aux nombreux défis auxquels les femmes sont confrontées dans les chaînes de valeur du cacao et de la noix de cajou. Alors, les défis, ils sont nombreux. Au titre donc de ces défis, on peut parler du fait que la chaîne de valeur du cacao et de la noix de cajou est perçue comme une chaîne de valeur qui est très masculine, dans laquelle il y a plusieurs hommes. Et il y a également des femmes qui travaillent dans cette chaîne de valeur, mais le travail des femmes est peu perçu, est peu reconnu, est peu valorisé. Alors qu'il y a des études qui ont montré que les femmes travaillent plus dans cette chaîne de valeur par rapport aux hommes, et le travail des femmes est estimé à plus de 60%. Il y a également d'autres défis qui portent sur... voilà. OK. Il y a également d'autres défis qui portent sur l'accès à la terre pour les femmes. Et ici, en Côte d'Ivoire, les femmes ont très peu accès à la terre et elles sont même quelquefois exclues de l'héritage familial. Et ce défi-là entraîne d'autres difficultés, d'autres problèmes pour les femmes, notamment la participation des femmes dans les coopératives de cacao et de noix de cajou et la participation des femmes dans des instances de prise de décision, aussi bien au niveau de la coopérative qu'au niveau du ménage. Donc, tous ces défis permettent à Soko de Vie de mettre en place un outil dénommé le programme de leadership féminin et gestion. Et donc, à travers cet outil-là, nous voulons contribuer à répondre à ces différentes difficultés précitées. Alors, de quoi s'agit-il? Le programme de leadership féminin est un programme de formation. C'est un programme de partage d'expérience, c'est un programme d'échange entre femmes et ce programme est justement axé sur plusieurs volets. Comme vous voyez ici, on a le volet formation. Donc ici, il s'agit de donner des connaissances, de renforcer les connaissances des femmes sur plusieurs thématiques en lien avec le leadership, en lien avec la chaîne de valeur dans laquelle les femmes travaillent. Après ça, on a l'axe qui porte sur le partage d'expérience. Alors ici, il s'agit nous invitons des femmes dont le leadership est avancé, est bien exprimé, mais des femmes qui sont externes au milieu de vie de nos participantes. Et donc, ces femmes viennent à ces formations pour partager leur expérience aux femmes participantes. Alors, elles donnent des conseils aux femmes participantes, elles les motivent à mieux s'engager sur la voie du développement de leur leadership. Le troisième axe, c'est un espace d'échange. Alors, nous offrons donc un espace d'échange aux femmes participantes de sorte qu'elles puissent échanger entre elles, échanger de leurs conditions de femmes productrices de cacao, de la noix de cajou, échanger sur leurs difficultés et trouver des solutions elles-mêmes. Donc, c'est vraiment un espace qui permet aux femmes d'apprendre les unes des autres et d'améliorer à leur niveau leurs conditions de vie. Et le quatrième axe de notre programme, c'est un axe qui porte sur l'identification d'un projet et la mise en place ou en pratique du leadership des femmes. Donc ici, il s'agit d'amener les femmes à identifier un projet de leur choix et de leur intérêt, de travailler sur ce projet et également de réaliser ce projet en exprimant ainsi leur capacité de leadership apprise au cours du programme. Alors, tout ce programme vise à apporter une réponse à ces problématiques citées ici, notamment l'accès et le contrôle des ressources et des bénéfices. On a aussi la participation à la prise de décision, le renforcement du pouvoir des femmes et la qualité de leader des femmes. Alors, je tenais à noter que toute cette intervention et tout ce programme, cet outil, s'inscrit dans le cadre du programme PROCED, dénommé PROCED, que Soko de Vie développe en Côte d'Ivoire, majoritairement au milieu rural, au bénéfice des producteurs et productrices de cacao et de noix de cajou. Et ce programme a été financé par Affaires mondiales Canada. Donc, avec ce programme, nous avons identifié plusieurs résultats très intéressants. Alors, donc en termes de résultats, 66 femmes ont participé à ce programme et ont amélioré leurs connaissances, ont renforcé leur capacité en leadership. Ensuite, parmi ces femmes, il y en a qui se sont organisées en groupement. Et donc, 11 groupements de femmes ont été créés par les femmes elles-mêmes. Elles ont identifié des micro-projets. Elles ont sollicité des appuis de Soko de Vie qui les a financés. Et ces femmes réalisent ces micro-projets pour leur autonomisation. et les résultats obtenus sont très intéressants.
Excusez-moi, Rachel. Excusez-moi de vous interrompre, mais je vois que vous n'utilisez pas votre présentation. Je veux juste m'assurer que ce n'est pas un oubli, vos diapositives.
Non, 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 je l'utilise. Oui, c'est ça.
OK, mais nous, on ne la voit pas présentement. On ne voit pas votre écran.
Vous ne voyez pas mon écran?
Non. Donc, peut-être recommencer le partage.
Mais je croyais que j'avais fait le partage là.
On essayait de voir de notre côté si on pouvait la partager pour vous, mais si
est-ce que vous voyez?
Oui, voilà, on la voit.
Est-ce que vous voyez?
Oui, c'est bon.
Ah, désolée, je pensais que je l'avais partagé, désolée.
Pas de souci.
Voilà, donc comme je disais, en termes de résultats, nous avons obtenu plusieurs résultats de ce programme-là. Alors ici, par exemple, pour la coopérative UCONACO, au début de notre intervention, il n'y avait que 4 femmes dans la coopérative en tant que femmes membres. Aujourd'hui, avec le déroulement de ce programme de leadership féminin, nous avons 185 femmes membres dans la coopérative. C'est pareil pour la participation des femmes dans le conseil d'administration. Avant de dérouler le programme, on n'avait pas de femmes dans le conseil d'administration pour la coopérative UCONACO. Aujourd'hui, on en a 27%. Et ça, c'est vraiment un résultat très intéressant. Et pour ce qui concerne la coopérative FAO, au début, on n'avait pas de femmes dans le conseil de délégués, plus bas ici. Alors aujourd'hui, avec le programme de leadership féminin, les femmes se sont engagées, elles ont compris l'importance de participer dans leur coopérative et ce, à tous les niveaux. Et aujourd'hui, on a 33% de femmes dans la coopérative en tant que déléguées. Et c'est pareil pour la participation des femmes dans le conseil de surveillance. Alors, avant le déroulement du programme, on n'avait que 20% de femmes dans le conseil de surveillance. Aujourd'hui, on en a 60%. Et ça, c'est un résultat vraiment à saluer. Toujours en termes de résultats, mais ça ne... OK. Donc, toujours en termes de résultats, il y a des femmes qui ont témoigné et qui nous ont dit que leur participation à ce programme leur a permis d'avoir des capacités en termes de prise de parole en public. Il y a également la participation des femmes qui s'est améliorée au niveau du ménage, mais également au niveau de leur coopérative. Et il y a l'exemple, il y a un témoignage que je voulais vous montrer. Il y a l'exemple d'une dame qui nous disait que sa participation au programme de leadership lui a permis d'avoir des connaissances nécessaires, des capacités nécessaires. Et aujourd'hui, elle s'est engagée dans sa coopérative et elle est aujourd'hui au poste de vice-présidente du conseil d'administration de sa coopérative. Donc, finalement, renforcer les capacités de leadership des femmes favorise leur participation de qualité dans la chaîne de valeur du cacao et de l'anacarde. Donc, voici en quelques mots ce que je voulais partager avec vous par rapport à notre outil du programme de leadership féminin. Et si vous avez des questions de compréhension, je reste disponible. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Rachel, et je suis heureuse que vous ayez pu présenter les diapos finalement. Dans tous les cas, les diapos sont disponibles dans le lien qui vous a été partagé là, au début de la séance d'aujourd'hui. Donc, vous pourrez voir l'ensemble des diapositives de Rachel. Merci également pour le contenu de votre présentation là, qui témoigne de l'importance de la transformation des perceptions liées au genre, mais aussi des structures de pouvoir au sein des instances décisionnelles. And now it's my great pleasure to invite our third panelist, Myrtle Whitboy, to share her insights and experience. So Myrtle, I will invite you to unmute. And you can also open your camera. Myrtle, can you hear me? Oh, we can't hear you. You're still muted.
Okay, there's no one. It's playing with me. You know, firstly, I would like to say I was listening to the speakers before, and I was listening to their contribution to feminism and women and empowering women. And it makes me think about, domestic workers. And it made me think about the International Domestic Workers Federation. That is a global federation, and that is, spearheaded by women. And it also makes me feel proud that that woman is actually domestic workers. And sometimes we as domestic workers, we don't really know that we are also feminists. We don't understand that the fight we're having is about empowering us as women. It's about empowering us as domestic workers. Now, this afternoon, I just want to give you a little bit of a journey through who are we. And if we look at what's happening in the world and we see how the world is expanding on global programs and we see how the world is uplifting women, we find there's a lack of investing in care workers. We find there's a lack of investing in domestic workers. As we find that many of those women that is doing care work and is doing domestic work are actually also having their own families, and actually after they leave their workplaces, they also have to go and care for their own families. So what are we saying today? We're saying we're talking about the world of feminism. We're talking about the world of empowering women. We sometimes talk about empowering women that's already halfway empowered. So I think the time has now come that we actually move away, that we start investing in those vulnerable sectors, that we start investing and saying to them, look, we want to lift you up. Care workers, domestic workers often have no health facilities. They have no social security. They actually have nothing. They can fall back on nothing. But we firmly believe if we start investing in all these organizations, in all these women that is there, that is working, that must care for their families. Yes, we're talking care work about nurses. We're talking care work about people that is qualified. But here we have a simple woman. We have a woman that has to care for a family. We have a woman that actually sometimes has no training. We have a woman that has a double shift. She is a domestic worker and she's a care worker because you also have to care for the elderly within that family. So now the question here this afternoon, I was actually asking myself and I was asking Rola, I wonder where I see myself this afternoon in the talks. But then when I'm listening, I realize that we have to start going back to our roots. We have to start going to empower those women that never have opportunities to be involved in organizations. We have to start educating that woman so that we can actually control our own lives. Sometimes we say, everybody is talking about domestic workers. Everybody is talking about, everybody talks about care workers. When this COVID-19 epidemic hit, who was it that kept going? It was the care workers because they had to be there to give care. We're also entering the care workers, domestic workers. We're entering into a world of technology that we are not aware of. We need to invest in that. We need to invest in, enabling care workers, domestic workers to be part of the new world we are in now. And only if we do that, if we as women feminists empower other women, we see so much of money is getting wasted on just things that's not benefiting to the woman on the ground. So this afternoon, my voice is actually saying, uplift the care workers, put more money in the training of care workers, put more money in the investing of domestic workers. We have to ensure that that woman is part of the global economy. We have to ensure that that woman knows their power. By being in a home and taking care of a family, you have power. You are strong. In the old days, we used to stand up for ourselves. And when they used to call us nannies and they used to call us servants, we say no. we are women, recognize us as women. And the IDWF has proof that we are women. The IDWF has proof that we have a voice for the voiceless. So when, Canada or big organizations think of where should we invest, how should we empower women, let us also give a thought to those women that is there all the time, every day. That is sometimes the backbone of the economy, but don't get recognition. So I would like to leave you with that. And I see there's women on farms. I also see, a lot of other investing in women. But let us just, for once, let us stop talking. And let us, every day they talk about domestic workers, care workers. They do researches after researches. But I think the time has come now to make sure that those workers and those women will have social security, will have health care, will be able to take care of their family while they're working for another family. So this is actually the message I want to bring across today. Let us really start investing. Let us start investing in bringing the woman from the bottom up to the top. Let she feel part of a feminist group. Let she feel part of those women up top there. Let she not stand back. And only if we can do that, only if we can bring all women together to speak in one voice and erase poverty and see that women gets quality care and see that women as looked after. I think only in that way we will go forward and we will be able to say, yes, we do care. Whether it's Canada, whether it's the US, whether it's the UK, whether it's the world, let us start bringing those women that is there every day. Sometimes the voiceless, sometimes let us bring them in line with the economy. Let us bring them in line so that they can also be part of this discussions, so that they can also raise their voices to know what they want. And this is this is what I want to bring across this afternoon. Invest in the IDWF, invest in their programs to be here. And I hope that just being here and bringing those vulnerable workers forward, that we will really in the future invest in them and empowering them. Thank you so much, Adriana.
Thank you very much, Myrtle, for sharing this powerful message and for being the voice of the voiceless today. I really appreciate when you said the importance of women, supporting and empowering women. So thank you very much for being here today. I'm sure the panelists will be, as the other speakers, and the audience is as inspired as I am by your message. I will now turn to the audience to ask their questions. I will also invite you, maybe if you're comfortable with it, to open your camera so we can see a few faces as we enter into the more interactive portion of this session. We will start by the questions being asked in the chat to Andres, and then move to questions asked to Rachel, and then questions for Myrtle. The way we will do this is that we will take 1 or 2 questions for each panelist at a time. So we will invite you, when I ask you to unmute, I will invite you to ask your questions or share your comments directly to the panelists. So I'm going to start with questions asked to Andres. I see there's a first question being asked by Jenny, but it's probably not Jenny because there's a lot of people registering under the same name. So maybe I will ask the first question and then invite Marie to go next with our questions. So for Andres, how were the women's rights organizations identified in your project?
So it's a good question. And because it was in the chat early on, I was trying to look for the criteria and couldn't find it. But yes, I mean, there was a set of criteria. And what we were looking for was diversity, right? I can't speak to the specific criteria, but we were looking for diversity. But what I do want to mention, and I think that this is a very important aspect, is the identification of women's rights organizations was done early on in the process. So even when we were writing the proposal, right? When we were writing the proposal, we got together with a set of women's rights organizations in both countries to co-design the proposal. That was one piece. And then with this core group of women's organizations, they came up with the criteria to select the rest of the organizations that were going to participate in the program. So in every single stage, just the proposal writing on the detailed project implementation plan, it was co-designed again with women's organizations. And that's where the specific criteria came in and so forth. So every step of the way, the women's organizations themselves are determining how they're going to select others and so forth.
Thank you, Andres. And I will jump to the second questions addressed to you. So Marie Niramana, can I ask you to unmute and ask your questions directly to Andres?
Hi, Andres. It was a very good presentation, very revealing. My question is about sustainability. That's the question we ask a lot. How do you ensure that there is sustainability in the country? So you train women, and then maybe after the UN comes and steal those women because they're trained, and then what happens to the organization? I've seen that a lot.
Yes, it happens. Yeah.
So that's the question. So how do you ensure sustainability? And this comes also to the current subject of localization. So how do you make sure that we are really giving all the tools to those women so it's everything is localized, including maybe other resources?
Absolutely. So in terms of sustainability, it's a tricky question, right? I feel that it's not as critical as in other programming areas, right? So you're training healthcare providers or government staff, you know that the turnaround, you know, it's insane. So it does hinder sustainability a bit. I feel that, it's my opinion, I feel that with the women's movement, yes, there's some that go to bigger agencies, but the movement is strong. It kind of rotates within the women. A couple of things. One is for the core assessment team, right? That we're facilitating the process that I mentioned were women's rights organizations. It was a large pool just because of the scale. So it's a lot of women that were trained that were facilitating these assessments. So I think that is there. But most importantly, in terms of sustainability, is think about it. You carry out this process once in a women's rights organization. And as I mentioned, they own the product. You know, they don't need a facilitator again. You know, it's within them to, you know, the methodology is there, the tool is there, the management information system is there. So actually they own it now. So even if the facilitator that facilitated the process went to the UN, they can still do it. The women's rights organizations can still do that and kind of still update their capacity development plans and so on. So there is an element of sustainability there. And localization, of course, it's this thing of co-design, right? So it wasn't, you know, I've made this mistake before where I designed something here and kind of, there you go. But this one was totally co-designed with them. So it's kind of localized in a way with some technical support from our side, but it was theirs.
Thank you.
Merci Marie pour la question. Merci Andres. Maintenant, je vais passer à une première question pour Rachel. Donc, la question, encore une fois, c'est de Jenny Baker, mais j'aimerais inviter la personne qui a posé la question à enlever sa sourdine puis à la poser directement. C'est la question qui se lit comme suit. Did women in the leadership training choose their own micro project topics? So anyone who wrote these questions, can you please unmute and,
non, mais c'est moi,
explain?
désolée. Bonjour Rachel, merci pour la présentation. J'aimerais savoir comment les femmes dans la formation de leadership ont choisi le micro-projet. Le sujet, est-ce que les femmes ont choisi le projet elles-mêmes ou est-ce que c'était une je sais pas, ils ont plusieurs de sujets dont sur lesquels ils peuvent choisir.
OK, merci beaucoup, madame. Alors, comme je le disais, l'intervention que Sokodevi fait en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est une intervention qui vise l'amélioration des conditions de vie des producteurs et des productrices de cacao et de la noix de cajou. Alors, donc, lorsque les femmes sont formées dans le programme de leadership féminin, à la dernière formation, on leur donne l'occasion de choisir un projet. Et généralement, le projet qu'elles choisissent, c'est un projet qui vise à sensibiliser les communautés sur un thème de leur choix, ou bien encore, c'est un projet qui peut les mobiliser autour d'une activité précise qui peut contribuer à l'amélioration de leur situation, leurs conditions de vie. Donc, ça peut être des micro-projets en termes d'élevage de volailles, ça peut être des projets en termes de réalisation d'une activité de sensibilisation communautaire. Donc, c'est un peu ce genre de projet. Mais toujours est-il que lorsque les femmes choisissent leur projet, Soco de vie leur apporte l'appui technique nécessaire. Donc, nous analysons le projet choisi et nous orientons les femmes sur le bon chemin de sorte que le projet, une fois réalisé, atteigne ses objectifs. Donc, nous apportons tout l'appui nécessaire, que ce soit l'appui technique, l'appui financier, l'appui en encadrement pour que ces femmes puissent mener à bien leur projet et atteignent les résultats escomptés. J'espère avoir répondu à votre question.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Merci, Rachel. Now I have questions for Myrtle. Maybe I will ask the person who wrote this. I'm curious to know about how your advocacy for social safety nets is shaped at the local level. So is it you again, Jenny?
It's me again. I'm asking all the questions. Thanks so much, Myrtle, again for your question or for your presentation. And I'm actually very curious about how you develop your advocacy campaigns so that they meet the needs of women in different countries.
Myrtle, did you hear the question?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, okay, wonderful.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in the international domestic workers, we have developed a framework that we, you know, in all countries, we have a trained leadership that will work with domestic workers within their country, because all countries differ on social security and social benefit. So all countries have a different approach to their governments. But we actually, you know, do the framework, and then we have people in the countries that will train those leaders of how they will go and approach, you know, the government or whoever is involved. Like especially in South Africa, we have a wonderful approach because we just signed an agreement with our labor organization and our social security of how we will develop better conditions and social security for domestic workers. Also, our approach is to when a country has a campaign, all other countries will form part of that campaign. And that is because we are much stronger, our voices is much stronger, and that is how we win through to government for social security and social network. So we actually link up to work united together and much stronger, and that is how we get, you know, actual results from governments and actually put our voices where workers need us more. But it's a teamwork, it's a united work, and we always make sure that all countries send their plans to the IDWF, and from there we develop it further. And that is how we actually get action and social security. So, but like I say, it's slow because some countries it's just a no-go. You know, they won't listen. But we are trying to make breakthroughs in some of the countries. And that is how we work on all benefits for domestic workers and care workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Myrtle. The next question is for everyone. So the three panelists, so anyone who would like to answer, and I will invite you, Kaya Barnett, to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kala. I'm here, I guess, as global affairs, but I also have a professor hat. So sometimes my questions come from that angle as well. Anyway, my question for everyone though is about cross-cutting issues and intersectional issues and how you're dealing with that et comment vous adressez ces enjeux intersectionnels et transversaux dans votre programmation and how you like disability inclusion or LGBT+ rights. Is there an element of that in your programming to make sure that it's not limited? if anyone wants to just take
Yes.
it on.
Go ahead, Martel.
I think, you'll be surprised. That's a very, very great question. And you'll be surprised to find that in the International Domestic Workers Federation, we were at the forefront when we were fighting for Convention 190. And one of the issues that come up was about, rights for all women. It was about lesbian, about everybody. And we as the IDWS actually made it out to see that is included, that all women, doesn't matter, must be included. And in our organization, we have many of women, and they are part of us. They are not a special program for that. They get integrated into our programs and working together with us, because after all, it's about women. It's about empowering women. So that is how we do it. And even in South Africa, we are involved with all organizations that work on that. And that is how we work together. The times of separation is past. We are all women, and we speak in one voice, and we speak for our rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Myrtle. Anyone else would like to respond to this question? Andres?
I'll jump in. Yes, it's a tricky and interesting question with a lot of nuances, and because it does depend a lot of the type of programming that you're doing, right? It does depend if it's health, if it's education, and so on. I would say this, like the first step, like what happened with women years back, right, is to visibilize that in your design. Right, so that's the first step. Like when you're designing a project, like make this cross-cutting issues visible, not invisible. So be it like explicitly mentioning that you're going to work with certain groups, or explicitly mentioning that you need this content specific delivery. Like do that. Like I'm M&E, so for me it's very important to visualize these groups in our performance measurement framework, right? Have associated indicators with specific groups and so on. So that's the first step, so that when you're sure that when you're deploying the project, these things are happening. And super importantly, think about how you budget as well, right? Because working with different segments and populations and so on requires different interventions and approaches, and it requires you to budget accordingly. Again, think about M&E, right? So for example, I'll do a measurement of sex disaggregated measurement, which is kind of like the usual, but no, I need to visualize other groups, so I need to budget accordingly to have special studies for smaller groups and so on. So that's just the example from my field, but it permeates all programming.
Thank you, Andres. I will, unless Rachel, you want to respond. Do you want? Yeah, go ahead.
Oui, bien sûr. Alors, donc, pour ce qui concerne l'intervention de Soko de vie, il faut savoir que Soko de vie adresse la problématique de l'égalité des genres. Nous, on parle de l'égalité des genres, ce qui signifie qu'on prend la problématique de façon globale. Donc, on s'adresse à toutes les personnes, que la personne soit lesbienne ou quelle que soit son orientation sexuelle. Tant que tu es bénéficiaire de nos actions et que tu respectes les conditions pour être bénéficiaire, tu bénéficies de nos actions. Donc, on n'a pas de restrictions en termes d'orientation sexuelle. On adresse vraiment toute la problématique dans sa globalité, et on s'adresse aux femmes qui sont productrices, aux femmes qui sont impliquées dans la production de nos chaînes de valeur, aux familles, aux membres des ménages des productrices et des producteurs. Donc, je dis aussi qu'il n'y a pas de restriction dans ce sens dans nos interventions. Et on essaie même de préparer la relève dans la mesure où nos interventions vont à l'endroit des jeunes femmes. On assure déjà la relève en impliquant les jeunes femmes, par exemple, dans le programme de leadership féminin. Il y a les jeunes femmes qui participent, et pour nous, c'est une façon d'assurer la relève dans la production de nos différentes chaînes de valeur. Donc, il n'y a pas de restriction en termes d'orientation sexuelle.
Merci, Rachel. J'ai une autre question pour vous. Je vais inviter Marie-Rosalie Sagna à prendre la parole. Ensuite, il va nous rester du temps pour peut-être une question. Là.
Bonjour. Merci à tous nos panélistes. Merci Rachel pour ta présentation. J'avais juste une question. J'aimerais savoir quels sont les défis persistants qui limitent le leadership et la participation des femmes dans les instances décisionnelles. Donc, au regard des résultats, je pense que c'est au niveau de l'UCOCONA, si je le prononce bien. Donc, la parité n'est pas encore atteinte. On voit que le taux de représentativité des femmes dans les instances de prise de décision est encore très faible. Donc, quels sont les éléments explicatifs?
À ce niveau, on peut citer les croyances traditionnelles, les coutumes, la tradition qui constituent le plus gros des barrières. Donc, l'UCONACO est une coopérative qui se situe dans le nord de la Côte d'Ivoire. Et là-bas, les croyances coutumières, les croyances traditionnelles sont vraiment ancrées dans les pratiques. De sorte que, généralement, la croyance la plus populaire là-bas, c'est que les femmes ne participent pas là où les hommes sont. Les femmes ne prennent pas la parole devant les hommes. Donc, il y a beaucoup de barrières qui font que les femmes elles-mêmes n'ont pas encore accepté qu'elles ont le droit, qu'elles ont la capacité. Donc, elles, à leur niveau, ça constitue déjà une barrière, à plus forte raison au niveau d'autrui. Donc, c'est vraiment toutes ces barrières liées à la tradition, liées à la culture, aux considérations de coutumes, etc., qui bloquent la participation des femmes au même niveau que les hommes dans les instances de décision des coopératives. Donc, je pense que c'est la plus grande barrière. À côté de ça, bon, il y a la barrière liée au faible accès à l'éducation. Voilà, les femmes ont une faible capacité d'écriture et de lecture. Et ça aussi, ça constitue une barrière parce qu'elle-même, à son propre niveau, elle se dit que je ne sais pas lire, je ne sais pas écrire. Qu'est-ce que je vais dire là-bas? Là-bas, on parle le français. Là-bas, on lit, on écrit. Je ne suis pas capable de le faire. Donc, déjà, à son niveau, elle se met cette barrière. C'est en cela que notre programme de leadership féminin est vraiment important et a donné des résultats excellents parce qu'on apprend aux femmes l'estime de soi. On apprend aux femmes de se considérer, de savoir qu'elles sont importantes dans leur ménage, dans leur société, dans leur coopérative, dans leur communauté. Et on apprend aux femmes à surmonter ces barrières déjà à leur propre niveau, mais au niveau de la communauté. Donc, c'est vraiment important qu'on travaille à cela et je pense qu'on est engagé sur ces questions.
Merci Rachel. Donc, je propose de prendre une dernière question puisqu'il nous reste là environ 5-6 minutes avant le mot de clôture. J'ai une question dans le chat qui est sur l'impact de la COVID-19. I think I would like to ask Myrtle if you can speak about the impact of COVID-19 on your work, especially, and on domestic worker and care workers.
I think with, you know, actually, if we look at the COVID-19, it had a big impact on the domestic sector. It had a big impact on our organizations because we were caught in a world of technology. We were caught in a world of domestic workers not have access to computers. Domestic workers also don't understand the value and the importance of a cell phone. And immediately we had to change our programs and we start educating domestic workers first in different countries about the power of their phone, smartphone or what. We share them the power of WhatsApp, of Google, and it was so surprising the response was in our big committees, the EXCO and all the other committees. And in that way, we could keep on with our educational programs and we could keep on teaching domestic workers. We taught them about Zoom. Sometimes it was smiling, but sometimes it was serious, but it was such a great opportunity to see how domestic workers was handling, beside the poverty, beside the job losses, beside all of that where we support solidarity support. And I think today I can stand proudly in front of you, even in South Africa, we trained 90 domestic workers on be able to do digital approaches, to be able to do Zoom. And that is our approach now. within the IDWF. We're going out, we're not blocking our programs, but we are saying how we can do Zooms and how we can keep online so that we don't lose touch with the reality. But that is one of the aspects that we also have to empower more women, more domestic workers to enter in this new world that we are in now of technology. But we never step back. We carry on and we survive and we're still standing strong.
Thank you very much, Myrtle. Donc, avant de conclure, donc, les organisateurs m'avaient demandé de finir avec un petit commentaire et puis des mots de remerciement. Donc, je voudrais profiter là, des quelques minutes qui restent juste pour, bon, d'abord, évidemment, remercier les 3 panélistes là, qui nous ont permis d'explorer des outils, programmes, mais aussi des luttes qui permettent aux femmes elles-mêmes de défendre leurs droits, mais aussi gagner plus de contrôle et de pouvoir sur leur devenir. Si je commence un peu avec Andrés, via cette approche d'évaluation participative, il a démontré vraiment le pouvoir transformateur des méthodologies qui sont choisies, puis l'importance de transférer le leadership, notamment au niveau du suivi, évaluation et apprentissage. Ça s'inscrit dans un désir là, plus large des organisations d'utiliser des approches de suivi et évaluation qui sont menées par les communautés elles-mêmes et par les partenaires. J'ajouterais que cette prise en charge du suivi de l'évaluation, évidemment, est étroitement liée à l'agenda féministe, comme on en a parlé aujourd'hui, mais aussi à celui de l'agenda de la localisation. Encore récemment, dans le cadre d'une étude qu'on mène à Activer le changement avec des chercheurs de l'Université Guelph, on a sondé plus de 100 organisations canadiennes pour leur demander dans quelle mesure la COVID-19 et la pandémie avaient eu un impact sur leurs relations avec leurs partenaires. Et vous ne serez peut-être pas surpris de voir que le suivi-évaluation était le 2e élément de leur programmation le plus impacté par la pandémie. Donc, c'est celui où il y a eu le plus grand transfert là, de responsabilité des organisations ici au Canada vers les organisations, leurs partenaires là, au niveau local. Et puis, dans ce même sondage, on voyait aussi que le suivi et l'évaluation, c'était le domaine principal pour lequel les organisations canadiennes engageaient des consultants externes. Donc, on voit ici là, qu'il y a vraiment encore beaucoup de travail à faire pour ce qui est de, si on veut progresser vers un agenda de localisation, pour que les approches de suivi et évaluation soient davantage menées par les organisations, menées par les communautés vulnérables notamment. Et je vais faire le lien avec ce que disait Myrtle. Donc, en effet, là, toute la voix, l'importance de donner la voix à ces communautés-là. Et moi, ce qui m'a particulièrement inspiré de la présentation de Myrtle, c'est l'importance non seulement des transformations des rapports de pouvoir, mais aussi à travers la lutte, à travers le plaidoyer. J'ai particulièrement apprécié l'accent mis sur l'inclusion de toutes les formes de care et de soins, non seulement sur les conditions des femmes éduquées et professionnalisées, dont on a beaucoup parlé dans le cadre de cette pandémie, mais de vraiment mettre en lumière sur l'importance d'adopter une approche intersectionnelle lorsqu'il est question du travail, particulièrement du travail invisible des femmes et particulièrement de celles qui œuvrent dans l'économie informelle, l'importance de la solidarité entre les femmes pour une défense collective des droits, et ce, peu importe la situation de privilège dans laquelle elles se trouvent et peu importe donc la perspective là, dans laquelle ces femmes-là se trouvent, donc au-delà de la hiérarchisation liée au sexe, au genre, aux classes, à l'âge, aux questions d'handicap ou d'orientation sexuelle. Donc, je trouve que la question qui a été posée d'ailleurs par Kala était particulièrement à propos là, pour mettre en lumière l'importance de ces luttes collectives et cette solidarité entre les femmes. Donc, je vais terminer ici. I hope you were as inspired by the 3 panelists as I was. Before concluding this great session, I really want to thank the organizer at CACID, especially Marie Gagné for coordinating this event, Ken Grantham for co-organizing this event, managing the chat, managing all the logistics. I would also like to thank Marie Nyaramana, the director of the International Assistance Research and Knowledge Division of Global Affairs, and the entire PVA team for collaborating with CACID. Also thanks to the interpreters from Court Largo for making this session more accessible to Anglophone and Francophone audience. So thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Noel. And of course, many thanks to our panelists for their insight, their inspiration, and for working on improving women's rights around the world. Je vous remercie à tous et à toutes et je vous souhaite une excellente journée. Et je vous invite peut-être à enlever votre sourdine pour remercier directement les panélistes.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.